Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is David Richman. He is an author, public speaker, philanthropist, and endurance athlete whose mission is to form more meaningful human connections through storytelling. In his first book, Winning the Middle of the Pack, he discussed how to get more out of ourselves than ever imagined. With Cycle of Lives, David shares the interconnected stories of people overcoming trauma and delves deeply into their emotional journeys with cancer. He continues to do Ironman triathlons and a wide range of endurance athletic events, having recently completed a solo 4,700-mile bike ride. He is married and lives in Southern Nevada and has twins who are in college. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, I actually, so a little fun fact.
Hmm.
I looked up really like where would 4,700 miles, where could that get me? But
Right.
from Kansas, if you flew from Kansas 4,700 miles, you get to Belgium.
Ah,
Kansas to Belgium is 4,700 miles.
that's a lot of miles. It
Yeah,
also
just
gets
shy
you,
of 4,700. That's
that's
crazy.
crazy. It also gets you from LA to San Diego, across Arizona, up to Albuquerque, down to Dallas, and then Austin, and then back up to Houston, through the panhandle of Florida, down to Tampa, over to Orlando, and then up to New York City. That's 4,700 miles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I've seen bikers like coming through. I'm in North Dakota. They come
Yeah.
through and it's like 85 degrees and they're biking up going. I'm like, I just bow to anybody who can. First of all, I think it's hard enough running, but biking up a hill, like, I don't
It
know.
was tough. Yeah, it was tough. And the first 12 days, the high was never below 100.
How?
Oh my
How
gosh.
do you do it?
It was a rough start. It
How
was
do
a rough
you,
start.
I mean, I know we'll get there like in this conversation, but like just the mental fortitude that takes.
Yeah, that one was tough. I think the toughest thing about the bike ride, really, like physically the toughest thing was it was shocking how, and I'm not even exaggerating, Victoria. It was shocking how no matter what direction I went, the wind was in my face. It was maddening. I had one day outside of Albuquerque. So from Albuquerque to wherever I went that day, where the wind was behind me, and it was my shortest day by 4 hours on the bike in the entire 45 days. I don't think I
Wow.
ever had a day where the wind wasn't in my face. It was maddening, maddening.
What an incredible feat. I mean, you could probably just, did you document that journey?
So I did. So the book is written first person from each of the 15 participants. So I interviewed them, got their stories, and I wrote their story first person as them. Okay.
Okay.
Or third person as them, but still it was their perspective. In between each of those stories is a short little narrative that talks about the bike ride, my feelings about the person that whose story just ended, or the person whose story was coming, and then some of the people I met along the way, and my own dealing with the grief of losing my sister to cancer. So it's a narrative that kind of binds those stories together.
How did this come to fruition? This mission to this 4,700-mile bike ride?
Well, so the bike ride was kind of a little bit of an afterthought. What I wanted to do was, I so my sister had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Okay, so she had young family, job, friends, the whole thing. Very vibrant woman, living her fullest life, and she was faced with this reality. And her and I talked about things a lot. Maybe not every aspect of what was going to happen, but pretty much we talked a lot. And I did a relay for life near the end of her. Actually, a couple days after she passed away, I did a relay for life, which is a 24-hour event. I did the whole 24 hours, and I noticed that that people did not openly communicate about the emotional side of their trauma. They were able to talk about like the tasks. When am I going to get my next PET scan? How do I navigate work? What's the best way to reduce stress? What's about like all the tasks around their cancer? Very a lot of opinions, very open to talk about. But when it came to the emotions, they just weren't, and that kind of set a seed for me. I was kind of just shocked by that. And then every year, her name was June. Every year, I did a for June in June endurance event where I'd raise money for the cancer center that took care of her. And I noticed that same recurring theme where people just weren't able to talk about the emotional side of it. And I thought, what if I got a group of really diverse people who had varying bouts with cancer or came from the perspective of a caregiver or a doctor or a survivor, loved one, whatever, and they were young, old, different types of cancer, different emotional experiences, different sets of childhood traumas, all these like wildly diverse factors. I figured if I covered as much of the general population as possible, then maybe we could start to understand how to start those conversations. Like like what are people going through? What have they gone through? And how can we better relate to them so that we can talk about these things that people don't talk about, the emotional side of it. So a long answer to your question, but how did the bike ride happen was I thought if we're connected by story, which I think we are, right? You're telling stories all the time. People that you have on are telling stories. We're connected by stories and we're connected by emotions. Um, what better way to connect these things than to get on a bike and go visit the people that I had talked to for a couple of years, but I had never met most of them. And so I thought it would be a good experience to connect that. And along the way, try to see whether or not this thought of people are not equipped to talk about the emotional side of trauma and grief and other things. And every single day, Victoria, that was reinforced that that this was even if it doesn't change the world, maybe it'll equip a few people to better understand how to start these hard conversations about the emotional side.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful concept. I love the story. I love it because obviously what I do is try to pull out the emotion of
Mhm.
people's experiences. And as a grief recovery specialist, I can tell you it is really difficult to help people to see that going there is healing. It really
Very,
is.
it totally is. And it's understandable why people don't talk. Like I've learned that through this journey because they don't want to say something stupid. They don't want to guilt others. They don't want to like my life is great. And I'm talking about your life, which sucks. And I don't want to make you feel bad. I don't want to feel guilty about how good I feel and how great things are for me. Right. Or people, they don't want sympathy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you kind of clam up about these things. But I mean, honestly, it's just shocking to me how many people, I mean, it's endless people said to me, oh my gosh, I wish I knew what to say. Or, I never really talked to my daughter about this because of XYZ reason. I sure wish I knew how, or I sure knew where could start doing that. And that's what I think these stories do is they shed light on this kind of block that we have about talking about this or dealing with the emotional side of it. Um, and I think, like, for example, like I just recently just got a note from a doctor who a retired, I forget what kind of oncologist he was, but he said, when I read your book, the first thing I did was read it in horror, thinking, oh my gosh, I was not a good enough doctor. I didn't know my patients the way I should have. He says, and then I let go of that thought. I read it the second time, thinking about how interesting these people were. And I thought to myself, how cool is that? I've gotten, plenty of notes from people saying, oh, now I understand, or I better understand, or this makes me be able to talk to so and so. And Um, Geez, if I've only affected if the few people that have, sent me these kind of notes, how great is that?
Yeah. Can you give an example from your book? One of the stories?
Yes, I'll give you one of my favorite examples. So I think that we can all put ourselves in the position of how difficult it might be as a patient. But how about how difficult it might be as an oncologist to deal with patients? And so I interviewed a woman who was absolutely spectacular. She'd been a oncologist specializing in female and male breast cancer for nearly 40 years at NYU. And wow, what a great story she had. And the reason that she was open to talking to me was because she had come to realization, having lived a long, successful life and having given so much to the community and was so passionate about wellness and survivorship, had a successful marriage, had raised a daughter who had grown up and gone off to her own career. She had realized that when she started out as an oncologist, Victoria, she kind of was just super focused on treatment and care and do things this way or whatever. And if people didn't really bond with her or listen to her, she just kind of moved on to the next patient. But after 40 years, she realized she was really good at what she did. If people weren't willing to take her medical advice, she wasn't willing to help them because she knew that she was a very good doctor, and she knew that that her regimen of care could enhance their lives, perhaps prevent the acceleration of their cancer, maybe even save their life. And she knew if they didn't listen to her, what they might potentially missed out on because she was at a point in her life where she was grateful for so much. And so her dilemma was, how do I walk out of one patient room where somebody wants to not take my advice? And I know if they take my advice, it will help them. And if they don't take my advice, it could potentially be disastrous. How do I walk out of that room and into the next room where there's a woman with two little kids on her laps and I've got to tell her that she's going to die? Right? That there's nothing I can do for her. The other woman, I could have done something. She won't listen to me. This woman, and just how emotionally difficult that was. And then we talked about that issue around the backdrop of not only being a woman oncologist at a time when women were not becoming doctors and surgeons and oncologists, and the discrimination that she faced and how she overcame that, but also the fact that, you know what, you look at a doctor and think everything's wonderful, but we find out that when she was 12, she came home one day and her dad just never came home. Like, he abandoned the family. And how she was able to go through her life and uh, fix that part of her, or at least reconcile that part of her enough to live a life where she could be loved and where she could love somebody else without this fear of abandonment. And so I thought to myself, after talking to her, you know what? Maybe she is much more in tune with being a good provider, but maybe perhaps when somebody comes in and a doctor is not as friendly or not as open or is maybe a little more distant, maybe they're going through their own stuff. Maybe when the doctor comes in, if we could take 1 second and ask, how are you doing? Maybe that doctor just walked out of a room where somebody wouldn't listen to them. And they're so upset about the fact that they want to help this person and they won't take it. Then they walk into our room carrying that into here. Maybe they just need a minute of attention. So I don't know. Those are the kind of stories that I think maybe will open up people's minds to think about how we might better communicate with those around us.
Thank you for sharing that
Mm,
because, to be honest, I had
yeah.
never considered that side of it.
Hmm.
I hadn't.
Who does? You wouldn't normally.
Right. The thinking of what that might be like for an oncologist, right?
Hmm.
And I've thought about certain different careers, you
Hmm.
know, social workers, going into homes where they have to take the children away, or, things like that. But I've never thought of the oncologist. And even just me with this podcast, and I'm sure people that you've talked to, it's like, wow, that sounds depressing. Like the work that I'm doing and in grief recovery and stuff, like people will say, well, that
Right.
sounds really depressing.
Right.
But I imagine for an oncologist, it really is, but it can also be equally rewarding too. Um,
Yeah, but I couldn't imagine. I could before I did this project. I couldn't imagine. I didn't even let it enter my realm. Like, how in the world could somebody be an oncologist? How could somebody deal with this kind of heaviness? I
yeah.
just didn't even let it into my realm. And then when I did let it into my realm, I'm just like, God, there's no way I could ever do that. Are you kidding me? To give bad news, to receive, to watch I mean, God, it takes a special person to be able to do that. And so I think that I have maybe just another level of respect, admiration, empathy for people that deal with this heavy, heavy stuff. There's another one. Gosh, Jen. Excuse me. Her story is absolutely amazing. Like, her is one of the most heartwarming, but also tragic situations ever. She watched her dad die of cancer when she was 6 years old. And uh, I'm going to condense the story really short. She grew up to be this super happy, lighthearted, wonderful, joyful, life is great kind of person. And it's because her mom and her sister in the community kind of really huddled into this loss and to the closeness, and she just lived in a very safe, loving environment, even though she lost her dad. And her dad called her Nurse Jen because during hospice she would bring him like a soda or something or whatever. And she kind of remembered that. She ends up going to nursing school, and the last thing she would ever do would end up in an oncology unit, especially a pediatric oncology unit. But she's got to do her rotation, and she does her rotation. She comes home bawling her eyes out, calls her mom, and is like, I just did the pediatric oncology rotation. And her mom goes, it'll be okay. And Jen goes, how would I ever not do that? Like, I have to, that's what I have to do. So she does that. Long story again, to the question of, how she deals with the pain of it is, she goes, every once in a while I go home and I have a cat day. I just pet my cat, because if I let myself think about all of the heaviness and all of the craziness that I deal with, it would really, really bring me down. She goes, I just sometimes just need to check out and pet my cat, because otherwise it's just too heavy. And I just go, golly. I mean, I couldn't handle one day of that. And she's doing it for her whole life. She's planning on doing it for her whole life. Like, it just takes a special kind of person. So I think that we oftentimes want to just go, oh, I don't know how you could go through that as a person with cancer or dealing with some other type of trauma. But the people like you, the professionals that give care and attention to the people that are going through these things, wow, man, that is another level.
And um, I just had a thought that escaped my brain. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to edit this out. To that point, I just actually just saw an ad. It's not an ad, but kind of a commercial.
Yeah.
Anyway, in a local commercial in our state, where they talk about the mental health of doctors and
Mm-hmm.
nurses and and staff like that, because as you said, like they're every day they're in this environment of great loss and sadness, and there's great stories of overcoming too, but um to not be able to bring that home, and but they're just like the rest of us, just
Mm-hmm.
as equally um have the potential to fall victim to addiction and alcohol use, and so it's actually I can't recall the statistic right now, but it was actually quite high of how many doctors commit suicide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um so just wanted to support that point you made, and that the emotional health and well-being of physicians and caregivers and caretakers. I actually just had a thought. I was just pulling weeds in my garden last night. And I just thought, sometimes the helper needs help
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really tough. So not only the caregiver professional, but also the survivor, the one going
Hmm.
through the cancer, just what is their experience? And so what I did, Victoria, is I said, we all kind of have the same emotional responses to trauma. Maybe we don't explore those emotions, but we have the same emotional experience, right? Like, for example, if you were stuck in a cave and a big black bear came in to attack you, you would be fearful. And there's not anybody that wouldn't be fearful. Now, if we were to survive that, we might or might not be able to talk about it or reconcile it or you share it with others or whatever, but we would have all experienced that fear. So, what I tried to do was to say, with each story, point A is when they encounter cancer. You know, Jen is the 6 year old, um, Dr. Myers as a 14-year old at her, or however old she was, 13 years old, eighth grade trip to the hospital where she was just like, oh my God, I'm going to become a doctor. So point A is then, or as a patient when you're diagnosed with cancer. Point B is today. How did the emotional journey from point A to point B happen or not happen? What, how were you able to or not able to deal with the emotional side in relation to the traumas that happened prior to point A? So an example would be Patricia's story. And Patricia's story is her cancer journey is just ridiculous to try to wrap your brain around. But she had five different cancers over a 35-year period. Could you imagine five different cancers? So basically, she was at the point where she was just like, whatever it is, just cut it out. And there was really nothing left to cut out. And also took care while she was going through chemo. Took care of her dad who was dying of prostate, I believe, prostate cancer. I don't remember which one, but just and works in survivorship community and the whole thing. Right, her whole life has been fixated on dealing with her cancer or helping others better navigate their own cancer journeys. But her story, really, Victoria, is about that in relation to the 4 years that she was basically kept prisoner in a very, very abusive, mentally, physically, and emotionally abusive relationship. She gets out of that, and you go, well, how could anybody ever survive that, let alone be open to finding love and trusting somebody, let alone be able to now start a fight for the upcoming 35 years of dealing with cancer. And so I think what we can take from that is how strong you could be is just what did you already survive, right? Because the first thing that I think of, and I think it's pretty normal to think, and most people would think of, 5 times cancer for 35 years. There's no way I could have dealt with that. There's no way possible. And that's what people go like, I can't even imagine like who does that? Who survives 35 years of 5 different kinds of cancers? And then if you put it into perspective of look at what she survived before that, who hasn't survived trauma? Who hasn't overcome difficulty? Maybe not to that extent, but yeah, maybe you gather the tools that you need and you draw on them to deal with whatever you need to deal with. And so, um, when she says, and this is kind of giving away the punchline, but when she says that, I might not gotten very far out of bed, but every single day, my goal was to get up out of bed, and I did, even if I only took one step. But my goal was to get out of bed every day. Um, that I can understand how important that is, and that was one thing that she was able to draw on to keep herself going every single day. And I go, well, if somebody said that to me originally, like, oh, I go, how did you deal with your cancer? And they go, oh, I just got out of bed every day. It wouldn't make sense to me. It sounded a little trite. But in relation to her story and what she overcame and what it takes to get out of bed every single day to try to, with optimism and strength, go about your day and fight whatever comes to you, now I get it. So I think I can draw from that. Maybe I can understand it a little bit.
Can you tell us about June and what she taught you?
So I could tell you that um, I was always a little jealous of June in one sense that we both had kind of the same traumatic childhood, right? And we both had the same kind of adversities. But oh my God, she found herself a husband, had kids, had a great career, had all these friends, and she was so happy and so like lighthearted. And meanwhile, I was all brooding and heavy-hearted and overcome with all this, this nonsense. I was always kind of like, man, she's living her life. She's so happy. So, one of the things about June that I remember is that um, she was just a happy person, and that's really hard. Like I don't find that many like truly grounded, like present, just happy people. And the fact that she had that for so many years is a real neat thing to remember about her, you know? And I thought, so that's what I remember about her. That what did she teach me? Kind of a lot. Um, more about life I've learned from keeping her present, right? After she died, keeping her present by embarking on these projects and forcing myself to kind of think about her as I'm biking across the country, these kind of things, um, that, uh, that she's had a really profound effect on my life, if nothing other than, the person that holds up a mirror that allows me to, kind of look at myself and examine, and she might be that person that holds up that mirror. And if that's the only thing that she's continuing to do, how grateful am I that she's doing that? So, I think that 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 what I've learned from this experience, whether she's taught me that or directly or indirectly, is that examination and dealing with these things and coming to terms with them, or attempting to come to terms with these difficult things, is a needed aspect of life. Like we can't just pack everything in a box in our brains and let it collect dust and think that it's like it's done. Like
Mm.
I think that we got to unpack all these boxes, examine it all, and continue stronger, more enlightened, more grounded, more centered, more connected to the people around us. And I think she's helped me do that.
So you had mentioned that at one point you were kind of downtrodden and
Hmm.
kind of woe is me, so to
Mm,
speak.
sure.
So was her diagnosis kind of what pulled you out of that and then started this mission that you have now?
Yeah, it kind of, Victoria, it's a great question. And it all kind of happened right about the same time. So I was in a very bad situation personally. And I had young twins, 4 years old, and we had to get out of that situation. And um, I was unhealthy. I was a smoker. I was overweight. I had a ton of stress in my life, both personally and professionally, and I had to make a change. And at the same time, June called me and told me that she had uh, uh, got news about a brain tumor. And so all of that happened at the same time. And so I don't think it was that event that made me change, but it was the series of events that happened kind of all at the same time, where I thought to myself, you can go through life reacting to things, or you can try to maybe for once in your life take a hold of the things that are in your life and determine your own course. And so um, I think that prior to that point, I I was in a very negative space, even though I had some great things happen to me. But I just I don't know. I just didn't feel connected to who I am, and I don't felt like I wasn't doing anything on purpose. I wasn't doing everything because I got to do it. I was doing everything accidentally and because I had to. But then I just kind of changed that mindset and said, no, 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 no. You gotta fix this stuff, and you gotta start thinking about the person in the mirror rather than what am I doing to make the boss happy, or what am I doing to make the wife happy, or doing things because I think I have to, right? I got to start doing things because I get to do them. And that really kind of 180 my view on on life and my perspective on things, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you began to live with intention,
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you worked through then? Like, where did you start? Like, because you didn't specifically say what you experienced in childhood, but I like to think that adulthood is childhood reenactments.
Yes.
And so um, the experiences that you had in childhood obviously were impacting you in adulthood, which I feel like is the absolute truth for all of us,
Yeah.
unless they're addressed. How did you start? Where did you start?
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, I'm still in the midst, as I'm hoping everybody is still in the midst of trying to be better, right? Trying to figure it out, right? I always say that I have kind of everything in common with the person that thinks their best days are ahead of them, and not much in common with the person that thinks their best days are behind them, right? I just don't have, because I feel like we got to constantly evolve. We got to constantly try better. We got to constantly learn. And sometimes I'll fall into a pattern where, God, that pattern's been around for decades, and it's caused me to act a certain way or react a certain way. And then I go, oh, I can do better. And it's like, well, if I still believe that after doing the same thing the wrong way for 30 years, well, okay, I'm comfortable with that, like that I could do better. So I think where it started was, honestly, I did get my kids and me out of this bad situation. Um, and I just said to myself, look, dude, you're in your 30s. I was in my late 30s at this point. And I said, you're overweight. You're a smoker. You're not healthy. You're not happy. You're not doing the things you want to do. I literally, Victoria, stood in front of a mirror going, who do you want to be? Like, literally, like, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be this bitter, kind of sarcastic, kind of like, like take on the world by yourself and just woe is me and whatever kind of person? Or do you want to just like become something else? Who do you want to be? And the first thing I wanted to be was healthy. I said, if I'm going to be alone with my kids, I want to be around. And especially in light of finding out that my sister was going to die soon, or might die soon from her cancer. And I thought, geez, man, I got to start becoming healthy. Well, how do you become healthy? Well, you stop smoking. How do you stop smoking? Well, you start running, because you can't run and smoke. You certainly can't swim and smoke. So I'll start swimming and running, right? Because that'll stop me from smoking. And that was step one. And then, okay, well, now that I'm healthy, I got to start losing weight, because, you know, trying to run with 30 or 40 or 50 extra pounds on you is a lot harder than running without those extra pounds. And then I thought, well, why don't you sleep better? Why don't you reduce stresses? Why don't you get rid of people in your life that are bad influences, or that aren't positive friends, that don't uplift you? Why don't you, when you go to work, why don't you start doing things because it's the right thing for you to do, not the right thing that you think your boss says you should do, right? Why don't you treat employees the way you want to be treated, not the way you think that they want to be treated? Blah, blah, right? So I just started, like you said, with intention, one thing after another, after another, after another. So it started at that point. And honestly, that was the beginning of a February of that year. And by March, I had done a 5K. By July, I had done a half Ironman. And by November, I did a full Ironman. So I said, I'm going to take it on. And I really took it on.
Wow. What year was this?
This was, so my kids were 5. So that was 1998 or so.
That was when your sister was diagnosed as
Yeah,
well.
well, let's see. Wait, no, I was wrong. That would be 2003. My kids were born in 1998, so that would have been 2003. Yeah,
That you changed your life
just almost 20 years ago.
and when your sister was diagnosed and
Yes,
all of
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So that was 2003. She died in 2007, and I did events for a number of years, and then took on this project starting in about 2011 or 12. So it took me a long time to put together the book, to make sure that I had the right people to just a couple of years ago do the bike ride, it connected all. Then I had to go through my editing and find the right publisher and go through their editing and the whole thing. It's it's not easy to put a project like this together, but yeah, that whole journey. In fact, I've been doing endurance athletics now for close to 20 years, and my kids know me as they were 5 years old, 6 years old when they were running across the finish line with me, and that's all they know me as. And so it's kind of cool.
So who inspires you today
Oh,
to
wow.
keep going?
Um, I think I'm more inspired not by a person, but I'm inspired by the belief um, that that you can have an effect on others, even if it's only an effect on my kids, my wife, myself. You can have an effect on others. I'm inspired by that. I'll never forget. I was embarrassed one year because I did an event to raise money for the cancer center that took care of June, and I was kind of embarrassed by the fact that I only raised a couple $1,000s that year. It wasn't that big of a deal. And I told that to the person that was coordinating the whole thing. And she goes, "What, are you kidding me?" She goes, "Do you know how many times we tell your story to donors? Do you know how many times we tell people, oh, this guy did, this 87-mile run in Mexico, and it was to honor his sister, and he did this solo ride and run in Mexico 22 and a half hours." And we say those are the kind of people that are dedicated to our center, and that raises us endless amounts of money. She goes, "So just the fact that you let us tell your story is enough." And I'm just like, "Oh, that's kind of cool, right?" So even if it only affects one person, but I had no idea that they were bragging about my story, which was nothing to me, and and it was helping them in these other ways. So I think I'm inspired by the fact that um, you never know what good thing you might be doing or what positive thing you might be doing that might affect other people and that they might carry on, for a long time. So I think that's what inspires me to continue to do these things is that, hey, even if it has a positive effect on one person, that's good enough for me.
I agree. And for those listening who feel like, because I struggled for a very long time, like I had this innate sense that I could do more, I was made for more, like my
Hmm.
potential was not being met. And I always thought, what is it going to look like for me helping people? Like, what does that look like? And so, for anyone listening, what is something that because you don't have to ride 87 miles or 4,700 miles to have an impact, right?
Right.
So are there stories that you of people who you've met along the way who have done um who have had equal impact but maybe don't think so, or just for some examples for people to
Sure. Oh, for
glean from?
sure. Are you kidding me? Every single day on that ride, and certainly a ton of other times throughout this whole kind of cycle of lives journey, I've run into people who just like, if I talk about it, it's as fresh as if it happened yesterday, and it's probably something that they've never thought of again, but it touches me in a way where I just go, people are remarkable. So I'll give you two quick stories. So one is I was at the end of one of the most ridiculous days ever, like 17 hours, 156 miles. I had like five flats. I was a solo, so I didn't have support that day. And so I was on my own from morning until night. It was absolutely 17 hours on a bike, which is it's just unbelievable. And this was like day 30. So it's like, I'm not, it's like, I'm not fresh when I start that day. Right. Anyway, so I get to the hotel and the night manager is working the desk, and she comes running around the corner. She goes, "Oh my God, we were afraid you weren't going to make it." And I go, "Oh, okay." Cause all the hotels were donated. Right. And I was on a schedule. And she goes, "I was so interested to meet you because my grandfather just passed away from cancer a couple of weeks ago, and he and I were so close, and I was hoping I got to meet you, and I read about what you're doing, and I think it's so great, and I'd love to make a donation." And I went, "Oh, that's really sweet, right? How nice." So The only open restaurant at that time, it was like midnight, was like a Burger King. So I got back on my bike and went through the Burger King drive-through and got myself a burger. Went up to my room and I get a call from this manager, and I go, "Yeah, what's up?" And she goes, "Well, I went on your site and made a donation, and it was a it was a very modest donation, okay, very modest, and but didn't matter to me, right? Yeah, I'm just touched that somebody would take the time." And she said, "I was wondering, is that a one time donation or is that a monthly thing? Because I don't know if I could afford that much monthly." And I went, "No, no, no. It was a one time donation. It doesn't matter. It's really, really sweet of you." So it was just like what I might have easily taken for granted, that dollar amount, right? Just easily. It was such a big deal for her that she was afraid that she couldn't afford that much monthly, but she still wanted to give. I was just like, holy crap.
Oh, brings tears to my
I
eyes.
know. How sweet is that? So another story is at the end of another really difficult day. Every story starts with at the end of a difficult day. So um, I did have a friend supporting me that day, and we found a restaurant that was open, a little Italian restaurant, and I was starving. And I started eating the meal, and we're talking about the event and what I'm doing and whatever. And the waitress overhears it. She starts asking questions. And the owner comes over. "Oh, everybody in my family has been touched by cancer one way or another, blah, 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 blah. Appreciate what you're doing. Love to buy you the meal." And I went, "Wow, that's pretty sweet." Because it's a little family restaurant. It's in the middle of Louisiana. Like they're not, they're not a chain restaurant that could afford to be comping meals all night long. So I was really touched by that. And then at the end of the night, when we finished our meal, the three waitresses that were working that night came over and wanted to take a picture with me. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet. And they handed me an envelope, and it had, again, a very modest sum of money. And I said, "No, no, no, you don't have to do that." And they go, "No, what you're doing is amazing. We wanted to give you our tips for the night as support." And I said, "Oh my God, they worked the entire night, maybe second jobs. I'm guessing in Louisiana, the minimum wage is not very high." And they were so moved by this stranger that came in to give me their tips for the night so that we could, continue to raise money. And I just thought, God, people are so nice, right? Like, so, so the impact that that had, and how many times I've told those stories, those are just two of 1,000 stories I could tell and have told, that just remind me of how remarkable people are and how a little gesture, it could go so far. It could go so far.
And I think too, sometimes when we tell people, oh no, don't, please don't do that, or, we are taking away their opportunity to feel joy,
Oh,
their opportunity to
absolutely.
give. And someone, I don't know, I had an instance or experience some time ago that really made me realize that we have one hand for giving and one hand for receiving, and it's just as important to be able to receive as it is to give. And for people who have a hard time receiving,
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to say, oh no, no, please don't, you know
Yeah, I've been
but it's
that
so
person. Yeah.
important, it's so important for the giver though.
Yeah. I've been that person my whole life. I have literally just started learning how to allow people to help me because it's what they want to do.
Hmm.
And I need to give them the opportunity to do what they want to do, just as they give me the opportunity to do what I want to do. It's something I'm
Exactly.
just learning because I become this guy who was totally self-reliant. So then I'm able to do the things that I need to do because I have to do them, right? Because I had to. Well, who doesn't? We're all kind of that person. And then I go, "No, like I'm hosting a bunch of people." And I go, "No, no, I got it. I got it. No. Do you need help cutting? No, I got it. Do you need help prep? No, I got it. Do you need help setting up? No, 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 you relax. I got it." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there going, I'm controlling the whole situation. I'm not giving them the opportunity to do what they want to do,
Hmm.
which is help. And it's
Yeah.
a hard lesson to learn, but it's an important one. And I literally, Victoria, as old as I am, as much as I've been through, I'm just now understanding that you know what, when people offer help, it's not because they think you can't do it. It's because they want to help.
Right.
They want to help.
Right. We often have that story in our head,
Yeah.
like you just said, like, well, we believe that for whatever reason that we got it, we can take care of it all, or
Yeah.
we've always done that, or
Yeah.
we have this story that they think I can't do it. Well, I'll
Yeah.
show them. you know.
I know.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
if that's our own garbage, it still
yep.
is, you know what? It's really nice because when I go to somebody else's house, I feel uncomfortable if I'm not helping. And here I am making everybody feel uncomfortable because I'm not allowing them to help.
Yeah, we go against the law of reciprocity.
Right.
Yeah,
So I'm glad we were able to talk about this because it's going to keep it in the front of my mind to always let people help if they want.
yeah. So, what is one tip that you've, and I'm sure you have many, but something that's really sticks out to you that you've heard through other people's stories, a tip that you would give other hurting hearts?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna give it to you because you're such a good interviewer, but I never give this one away because it gives away the ending of the book. But I'm gonna tell
Oh,
you. I'm gonna tell you because it's such a great question, and I know that not everybody has time to read books and whatever, but it's a lesson that I learned, and it came to my consciousness literally at the very end of my bike ride. So I set out on this whole thing to start the hard conversations and better equip people to understand what they've gone through and all of this other stuff. So I'm at the end of the ride. I'm literally like on the other side of the George Washington Bridge, like trying to figure out how to get into and navigate to the right place in Central Park. I don't know where to go. And I see these two cyclists, and they're talking, and I wait for them to finish, and I talk to one of them, and I say, "Hey, how do I get over the bridge, and where do I go? Where do I turn? What do I do?" And so she gave me directions, and then she noticed on my jersey that I had a stupid cancer logo, one of the charities that the Cycle Lives Project supports. And by the way, all the proceeds from the book go to support the cancer focused charities that were picked by the book participants. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, are you doing a ride?" And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Where'd you ride from?" And I said, "Oh, I came from Manhattan Beach." She goes, "From Manhattan? Like downtown Manhattan?" I go, "No, Manhattan Beach, like California." She was like, "What?" And so we started talking for a minute. She goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "Well, I'm a cyclist because of my dad." And I said, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool." And she goes, "Yeah, I died 4 years ago from cancer. And the only thing he really wanted to do was to ride his bike." And I go, "Oh my gosh." I go, "What was he like?" And she told me a couple of stories. And then she said, "Oh my God, you want to hear a story about his funeral?" And so she told me this crazy story about his funeral. And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." And I said, what do you think about when you're writing and blah, 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 blah. And so we had like this, I don't know, 7, 8 minute conversation. And I went my way and she went her way. We'll never talk to or see each other ever. Our paths will never cross again. And as I'm biking across the bridge, I'm thinking to myself, when I started this journey, if somebody would have told me, "Oh, their father died of cancer 4 years ago," I would have went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, I'm sorry." And I would have uncomfortably exited the conversation and went about my way. But now I know that that was an invitation for me to ask, "Oh, we're close. How do you feel about it? Wow, it's been 4 years. How does that affect you?" Or, "Wow, tell me about him," or whatever. And it had this great, uplifting, wonderful, even if if it ends up being a heavy conversation, which sometimes it does, but it's this another level of connection where somebody says, "You know what, even if it was a total stranger, they heard me." Or for me, I'm the total stranger who somebody entrusted to tell a couple of these very intimate stories to. And the way that so it was a little practical joke. He loved cycling so much, and everybody used to make fun of the fact that he had this one jersey that had all these little ice cream cones all over it, this one little bike jersey. So he said to his daughter, "Hey, when you do the viewing, put me in my little ice cream cone jersey." And he thought that would put a smile on everybody's face. And I thought to myself, how sweet is it that if I'd never asked her that story, I would have never, if I'd never asked her about her dad, I would have never got the story. And this was whatever, 3, 4 years ago. I don't think it's ever left me, the vision of a guy lying in his
Hmm.
coffin wearing a ice cream cone cycling jersey just to put a smile on people's faces. How wonderful is that? And
Yeah.
so very long answer to your question of what do you learn. That's something to learn. It's just lean in, like have the conversation. Don't be afraid to say something stupid, right? And oftentimes that question I'll follow up with is, were you close to them? Because might be a stupid question. Like, of course I was. It was my dad, you idiot. But nobody's going to say that. They're either going to say, no, I wish I was closer, or they're going to say, yeah, actually I was, and blah blah, and it'll be a prompt to continue to have you have a little bit of a connection to them. So again, sorry for the long answer, but I think it's what I've learned is that leaning in, that asking a question, that being able to be vulnerable, or allow them to be vulnerable, but it's safe, in a safe place, like you really
Mhm.
care. Um, that's what I've learned is that's there's that's where some beauty lies in all of this nonsense.
I completely picked up on that right away. You asked her about him. And I think it's really giving people the permission to share, because
Hmm.
sometimes people feel like, especially as grievers, they don't want to, you know, bring the mood down or make someone else, where, I could go into a lot of stuff with grief recovery and everything I've learned, but it's really about permission, I think,
Yeah,
for a lot
and
of grievers.
what you said is about us being, what did you say, grown up kids or whatever.
Well, I
We just
think it's being curious.
yeah, but earlier when you said we're just like grown up kids or something, or
Oh
we're
yeah,
kids, right?
adulthood is childhood reenactments.
Yeah. And what do kids want? They just want to be safe. And so if
Hmm.
you're safe, if you're given permission and that somebody's asking a question because they care, right?
Yeah.
Then be free to give the answer and allow them to care. It's it's a it's a weird dynamic because it's totally understandable what you just said. You don't want to bring people down. You don't want to make them feel guilty. You don't want what, but you know what? They gave you permission to talk.
Hmm.
And so what I learned is to lean in more and to talk and to ask questions and to give people permission to talk about whatever they're going through.
Yeah, it's my mission too.
Nice. Well, that's why we're aligned.
Yeah. So, what are ways that others have supported you, that you have found to be helpful as you transformed your life?
Oh my gosh, there is endless people, right? So people have taught me how to be a better athlete, right? There are people who taught me how to have work life balance. Um, I met my wife, who has been unbelievably supportive of the things that I want to do. So to find somebody that believes in you is really amazing, right? It's really amazing. Maybe she came along when I would have allowed somebody to believe in me because
Mm-hmm.
maybe I believed in myself a little bit more. But
Mm-hmm.
she's been a great help. My kids have been a wonderful help because I'm very close to them. They're pretty talkative, and we're pretty open about the effect that we've had on each other, and life has had on us, and that kind of stuff. So I think that I mean, there's just been endless people and endless circumstances that have helped me, and I think that it probably does boil down to that, like what you said a while ago, living with intention. I think it's like living on purpose, like really taking charge of what you want to do and who you want to be, and being okay with that. Every once in a while, God, I used to think it was so stupid. I wouldn't tell anybody I'm going to go running because I was an overweight smoker. What do I have any business doing running? So I would hide. I would just do it on. I wouldn't tell anybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I was embarrassed. Well, if I'm living on purpose, what do I care what anybody else thinks? It only matters what I think, right? And if I'm a runner, I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to tell people. If I'm going to sign up for a marathon, I'm going to tell you why not. Live it right. Live it on purpose. What do I care what anybody else thinks? It only matters what I think. So I think that fortunately surrounding myself with people who were supportive or additive or at least not detractors from what I was doing, um, that has helped me along the way for sure.
Well, I can see why you would hide that, because if I were in those shoes, I would feel like, well, they're probably just going to say that, oh yeah, you've said that before, or people say that all the time. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's like that fear of failing, not for them, but for yourself. And so if I speak it out loud, it's almost like this feeling, oh, I might jinx
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
it's like,
Totally.
what if I don't follow through with this, or what if, and I've already told people, right? So it's almost like you're creating your own safety blanket of, well, I'm not, I'm kind of committed, but I'm not committed because I didn't tell anybody else,
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that part of it too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I guess a lot of people don't start things because they're afraid that they're going to fail. Right. And I would do that. Like whatever I took on, I knew I was going to succeed, but I wouldn't take on things I possibly could fail at because I didn't want to fail. Right. So I never tried to quit smoking until I quit smoking.
Mm.
Because that, right. I
Mm-hmm.
never tried to become an athlete until I became an athlete because I didn't want to fail at it. It's like, remember that, I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie The Matrix when they're getting ready to fight for the first time, and Lawrence Fishburne looks at Keanu Reeves and he says, "Stop trying to hit me and just hit me." Right? So I didn't want to try to do something; I just wanted to do it. Right? And so when I felt like it was okay to be this person, then I would use what you just said to my benefit. I would say to somebody, I'd go, "Guess what I'm going to go do? I'm going to go do a 50-mile run." Right? Look, I paid this entrance fee. I'm doing a 50-mile run. And then I'd have to do it because I didn't want to fail. Right. So I used it to my benefit. Right. Once I knew that I would do whatever it takes to accomplish it, like I had done it, throughout my life on things that I had to do. Right. I had to put food on the table or whatever. Right. You
Mm-hmm.
just figure it out. But this living it on purpose and doing it with intention and being who you want to be or becoming who you want to, trying to become who you want to be, um, yeah, then I would put it out there knowing that I wasn't going to fail. If I said I was going to do something, I was going to do it. But being confident, right? If you want to lose weight, if you want to be a better friend, if you want to work more, if you want to start a business, you want to do whatever, do it. But you know what? Like you got to get out there and do it, and you got to tell people you're going to do it. You got to know there's no way you're not going to succeed, and you got to just get out there and try to do it. And that is a different way of living your life, and it's really wonderful because I don't care about failing. I don't care if I don't finish something. I don't care if I but if I go into it with good intention and I go into it with purpose and I give it my best effort, that's all I can ask.
Do you think one thing that keeps people from following through is lack of accountability? Do you think accountability is the missing piece for a lot of people?
Yes, it's a great question. I'm part of a group right now where we're dealing with that issue of accountability, and yes. Now, there are people that are more accountable to others than they are to themselves, right? So they won't tell other people because they don't want to be held accountable. Or they won't believe it in themselves because then they'd have to hold themselves accountable. And so I'm the kind of person where I am probably equally motivated by not wanting to let myself down as I am by not wanting to let other people down, right? But I like this idea of accountability, having a partner that holds you accountable, or a group that holds you accountable, or just write something down that you have to look at it as your own self accountability. But accountability is kind of like a scoreboard. It's kind of like a scoreboard. I don't know very many sports that are played without an accountability,
Yeah.
without the score, right?
Yeah.
We're all winners and losers. We win sometimes, we lose sometimes, right? Heck, in baseball, if you're 50-50, you're doing pretty good. So, uh, I mean, as a win loss as a team, you're doing pretty good. So, but without a scoreboard, without accountability, you don't have anything. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with accountability.
So, throughout your life, what has given you the most joy and hope for the future, too?
Oh, yeah. I think the most joy has come from learning how to lean into positive relationships. I think that's where the joy has come from. Um, I'd say second to that is um, trying to be happy, allow myself to be happy, right? Um, I always felt like for a long time, Victoria, I thought I'm gonna try to get to a point and then I'll be happy. Right? If I get a better job, I'll be happy. If I can make more money, I'll be happy. If I just get a little bit healthier, I'll be happy. If I lose a little more weight, I'll be happy. Or whatever the thing is that we tell ourselves, like when this happens, then everything will be okay. That never happens. So, you know, whatever you're trying to get to be in an emotionally better place, whenever you get to that point, you're not in an emotionally better place. It's just delusional. So I have learned, or am attempting to continue to learn, how to be happier and content and joyful and present and kind of grounded, no matter what's going on, right? So I say being happy has given me the most happiness, right? Being joyful has given me the most joy. That and positive relationships. So um, uh, I'd say a distant third is writing. So writing is giving me a lot of joy as well. So I think those three things.
It's wonderful. Those are good. Those are great.
Yeah.
I could actually go into another side thing about energy because I was kind of wanting to get into that about just the energy of emotion and how it
Mhm.
gets stuck in us and then leads to disease. Um, do you have any quick
Yeah.
thoughts about that based on the
Yeah.
stories that you've heard from people and how you've connected the dots to it's not just one grieving experience, it's always many, right?
Any. I mean, look,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know what people have gone through, what we've gone through. Like one of the things that was amazing about this journey was I talked to tons and tons of people as potential book participants. What's amazing is no matter how incredible the story seemed to me, every single person said, my story's not that interesting. Right. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow, what you went through, the suicide of a parent, escaping, certain death, like all of these crazy things that you experience. And it's like nothing. And it's like, we're just living, people are just living the lives we live. Okay. So I do believe that some people benefit from believing in the negative. Like some people, like if there's all this attention to all this negativity, and that's what keeps them going, right?
Mm,
And there's some people who draw themselves to all this positivity, and that's what keeps them going. I'm not really sure if I know if there's a cause between negativity and stress and negative elements or whatever. But I will say for certain that whether each person believes it or not, Victoria, there was something unbelievably uplifting and inspiring and hopeful and positive underlying these negative experiences. Maybe at the time there wasn't anything positive about what they went through, but how it affected others or where they came out on the other side or whatever. There was some amount of positivity, and it's the negative stuff that kind of like makes us react and makes us feel the ouch and the pain, and it's like, oh man, that's so rough. But it's a positive, uplifting, hopeful stuff that stays with us. And so I think that it's okay to have any kind of positive or negative energy help get you through a situation, but let's try to remember that the positivity, the uplifting part of it, the inspiring, the hopeful, the forward thinking, optimistic that we can take from these things, that's what lingers, right? That's what lingers. So whatever you need to do to get through the situation, fine. But I really try to tend to focus on the positive and the uplifting. And I get this thing from everybody. sorry for rambling a little bit, but everybody who reads the book tells me, "Oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be so depressing and so rough to get through." And every one of these stories, even though sometimes they're so rough, they're like kind of inspirational, right? And I go, "Yeah, yeah, they are." And so, what we can take from these negative experiences or difficulties in life or periods where we need to grieve or go through trauma is that there is something on the other side, right? Let me tell you, can I tell you a quick story about Terry? So,
Sure.
Terry's this person who, oh my gosh, first, I was so, ask my wife, I was so reticent to tell her story because I thought I might make her sound pitiful. Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. Because she had been kind of abandoned by her family. She gets cancer on her way to the hospital. Her boyfriend, her fiance says, sorry, I'm out. I can't handle this. By the way, I got somebody else pregnant. You're on your own. Then she goes in support groups for her particular type of cancer, and basically everyone in the support group dies. So she's abandoned there. She gets a recurrence of that cancer, has to go in for a bone marrow transplant, a second one. And what happens during the post care? The person that's supposed to take care of her says, I can't handle this. I'm not strong enough. You're on your own. Sorry, you're on your own. Oh my God. You want to talk about somebody? She's just trying to figure out, why am I here? Like, everybody abandons me. Everybody dies. I'm not supposed to be living. I can't accomplish the things I want in life. And it's just like, oh my God. And almost everybody tells me her story is so inspiring because at the end, what she tells me is, she goes, look, I live in a world of odds. I got a 5% chance of this. I got a 95% chance of that. She goes, I flip the odds to 50-50. Things are going to happen or they're not. And she goes, all I want to do every day is wake up to see the sun, to try to figure it all out. That's it. That's my goal. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. 50-50 chance. And I thought to myself, with everything that she's gone through, how inspiring is it? How hopeful is it? How amazing is it that she's able to have this kind of 50-50 view on things are going to happen or they're not? And all I'm looking to do is to get up one more day to try to figure it all out. Isn't that what we all try to do? And with what she's been through, she still has that kind of positive, optimistic, hey, if the sun comes up, it'll help me figure it all out. How cool is that? So, anyway, again, another rambling answer to your question, but it's those type of stories that I think are just so inspirational.
Well, and I think you're speaking to what my message is too, and what I try and share is that there is another side to it, but you have to like move your feet. You have to take action.
Yeah.
It's not just going to happen on its own. I always say too, it's like you're suffering already. You might as well suffer and move your feet.
Oh, it's so true. In my first book, that was, not like an industry book or a athletic book or something, but was a book. I talk about this time that I did this event, and it was the first endurance event I did. I was still smoking at the time. I did a 87-mile rollerblade race from Athens, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia. 87 miles on rollerblades.
Oh my gosh.
Completely stupid. And I had no business doing that. And at some point, about 50 miles in, I was trying to rollerblade up this hill, and I was spent of every single thing I could be spent of. I was pissed off at myself that I was a smoker. I was pissed off at myself that I was there. I was so angry. I was so like, this is not you. This is just not you. And I'm sitting there absolutely dead on my feet, right? And I'm looking at this white sweat because it's so salty, right? Because so the sweat was so, and it's dripping on the asphalt, and it's creating this line that's going down this hill. And I said, and I'm perpendicular to that, so I won't slide down the hill. And I'm looking down there, and I remember having this thought of, as much as you think you don't belong here, as much as you've given 100% of everything that you have, there's no possible way you could go forward. And then I thought to myself, well, every step with a rollerblade, but every point that I go forward from here is a place I've never been, is a brand new experience, a brand new me. Like if I could just take one step, I'm going to find out something new. I'm going to, it's going to be a territory I've never been before. That was really empowering. So, to what you said, yeah, if you can just keep your feet moving, you're going to discover stuff. You're going to find out a whole new you. You're going to encounter something that you never would have if you didn't move your foot forward. So, I totally, totally ascribe to that opinion.
Yeah. As I think it's so easy to get caught up in the story of what happened to us, or,
Mm-hmm.
that we just allow it to dictate every action, therefore, moving forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, I think we're on the same mission. Let's bring hope that there's hope, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is. And look, some people uh, have it rougher than others. And I don't know what to say to that other than it's just life, right? You might look at me and go, I could never have gotten through the things you've gotten through. And I look at you and go, what are you kidding me? I could have never gotten through the things you've gotten through. But we're just getting through what we get through,
Hmm.
right? The point is that we have a finite amount of time. We might as well make the most of it. We might as well try to be the best we can be, right? What's that famous saying? I'd rather be an optimist and wrong than a pessimist and right, right? So I might as well try. I might as well try to take that one step forward.
No, it's not even try, right? Comes
Right.
back to you just do.
Just do. Right. Right.
Because
Yeah. I
he'll
agree.
my husband, it just drive me crazy. This was before my personal development and stuff that stuff of working on myself. But he would always say, there's no such thing as try. You either do or you don't.
Yeah.
That's what he
It's
would always
true.
say.
It's true. So
Grab life
then
by the handlebars, right?
by the handlebars and take one step forward. Just do it.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, if anybody wants to read the book, you could buy it wherever. And like I said before, 100% of the proceeds are going to support the cancer focused charities. And it's not the money, it's more the hope that, if you read the book, maybe you can relate to one more person that needs you to relate to them. Or you can allow one more person to relate to you because that's what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the bigger goal of trying to equip people to better have these conversations, to more easily have these conversations, to understand what other people are going through, or to allow people to understand what we're going through or have gone through. Um, it's a really important facet of trauma. It's a really important facet because, as I know that some people have it way harder than we do, but everybody has it hard in one way or another. Everybody does, right? And if we can just help them or allow them to help us or just help each other get through it or try to get through it, right? How great is that? So I guess that'd be the last thing I'd say. If anybody's interested, do that. And I think, hopefully the book will help.
And where can people find you?
And they can find me at cycleoflives.org.
Okay. And are you on social media at all?
I am. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Just all you gotta do is look up David Richman or Cycle of Lives or both, and you'll find me. I often post about inspiring cancer stuff, inspiring life stuff. I also kind of quasi document some of the crazier athletic things that I do, and so yeah, it's pretty fun.
Awesome. I will put all the links in the show notes as well. So look there if you want to
Thank you,
connect with
Victoria.
David. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of the wisdom that you've gained throughout your experience of Cycle of Lives, and with your sister, and sharing her story with us as well. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for asking so many great questions. You're very good at what you do. And I know that you're helping people. So keep it up.
Thank you. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.